Now, 6 South African activists who were part of the Global Sumud Flotilla to Gaza returned to a hero's welcome at the OR Tambo International Airport in Johannesburg on Wednesday. The South Africans, together with more than 500 other activists from 45 countries, were last week abducted by Israeli forces in international waters from 41 vessels making up the Global Sumud Flotilla as it sailed towards Gaza in an effort to break Israel's crippling siege on the coastal territory, which has caused an enormous humanitarian crisis. Now, for more, we are joined by Dr. Fatima Hendricks, an activist on the Global Sumud Flotilla. Dr. Hendricks, I think first and foremost, welcome home, and really talk to us about what it was like in those moments when the Israeli Navy intercepted your ship, and how did you know from that moment that this was not going to be a peaceful handover, but really a full-on raid?
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be back home to a beautiful people that work so hard for our release. Thank you so much to every single South African that exerted effort. It was really a moment for us to be on the water on the dark ocean, with surrounded by so many vessels. I was on the boat Amsterdam, and we were being hounded for about 10 hours, and we had 4 water attacks via water cannons at different times through the night. So it really was a prolonged period on the waters, watching other boats being intercepted and boarded and activists kidnapped. And we were literally trying to etch our way further and further towards Gaza, while, kind of trying to dodge, the ships. Eventually, we were confronted, told to switch off our engines, and the IDF identified themselves. We identified ourselves to say that we're humanitarian workers in international waters and that they need to stand down. And so we were subsequently boarded at that point.
And I would imagine what happened after that, because for so many of us here back home in South Africa, all we saw were distressing videos coming from some of those ships. And then there was that absolute moment of silence when we couldn't reach any of the South Africans or some of the activists that were on the ground. Take us into what happened in those moments of silence where we had no communication with you whatsoever.
Absolutely. So for our boat, they were jamming our signals. So as I was making videos, I could not live stream because there were ships that were deliberately jamming the signals of boats, so we could not communicate with each other, and we couldn't upload videos or have any Starlink connections. So that was the one factor. So videos were coming in dribs and drabs as we were trying to update people back home on the urgency of what was happening, as well as the fact that we had to throw our phones overboard when we were intercepted, for fear that the IOF would get hold of our phones and basically you be very vulnerable, because they could get the information on our phones and then be very harmful to our family members back home. So it was out of security that all of us had to toss our phones overboard. So we were literally alone on the ocean with the IDF, and we were kidnapped at that point and headed towards Ashdod port.
And I understand once you were essentially kidnapped and detained, there were moments there where you faced rifles, imprisonment, as well as humiliation. Some of the reports that we got from the members there. What image or moment from your detention still sits with you the most?
The moment that they actually stormed our cell, we had been trying to get mattresses, and a scuffle broke out between IOF and our cellmates. And it escalated to a point that one of our cellmates was pushed to the ground. Another one got to the ground to try to protect her. She was dragged and pulled by her hair, and by one of the IOF soldiers, and in self-defense bit one of the soldiers. Subsequently, we were pushed back into the cell as we were trying to de-escalate the situation. And at that point, not long after, the riot police stormed into our room, and we had guns pointed at our heads, laser rifles, really being, I think we were 10 unarmed women backed up against the wall on our knees with the rifles, and soldiers in riot gear with dogs in our faces. So it was really a very, very tense situation. And this comrade of ours, Rias, she's actually still in prison at the moment, illegally detained by the occupying forces, and we are campaigning for her release.
And I'm sure that even in that moment, there was no certainty as well whether or not the message had gotten across to South African officials. I'm sure, talk to us a little bit about being in that cell and not knowing whether or not the communication had gotten to South Africa. What were, as well as you've mentioned, the rifles to the head, the trauma that you experienced in there?
Absolutely. So we had only at every point, each one of us said we are humanitarian workers. We request consular services and legal representation. And imagine the very, very first time I got to see a lawyer was in my court hearing from Adala. Adala lawyer was present at my court hearing because I had refused to sign any documentation to say to plead to my so-called guilt. I didn't sign the custody order. I didn't sign the deportation order. I didn't sign the request for early departure. None of that. I just refused to engage with the Zionist regime in this legal way. And the first time I got to see a lawyer was at my court hearing. So it was very scary days for us to not know whether we were going to see a lawyer at all. It was also very scary days when we had not heard from our consular services. Other countries were being seen, and we had not seen our consular service for days. I think we were one of the last countries to actually receive consular services, and that was because we were told South Africa had been blocked from accessing us. And when we did see our consular service, our consular members, it was literally for 5 minutes. We were given 5 minutes, whereas other countries were given over an hour, multiple visits, and we were just given 5 minutes with our consular.
And despite this trauma, you've said that the Global Flotilla, of course, would do this again. Talk to us about that conviction. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we were the 38th flotilla, the 39th, the 1,000 Madeleines was intercepted. Some activists are still in prison. The Conscience was intercepted. And we will continue coming until this illegal and immoral siege is broken. I mean, this movement began in 2005, and it will not end until the borders are open, aid can reach the Palestinian people in Gaza, and there is free movement. And what we have right now is that we have this delirious situation of a peace plan, which is really a ceasefire dressed as a peace plan. There are two separate issues here. One is a ceasefire. The ceasefire is a legal obligation for people that are perpetrating a genocide. They have to stop the genocide. They have to have a ceasefire, and they are legally obligated to let aid in. That is not a peace plan. A peace plan is a different matter, which involves the Palestinian people determining their future in a just way that accounts for the war crimes that have been committed against the Palestinian people.
And that was really going to be my next question. We know that there is a ceasefire at the moment, and it's often a very fragile truce, if you will. But the call for humanitarian aid, many South Africans watching may, of course, admire your courage, but are still wondering what practical solidarity looks like from here at home. How do we ensure that ordinary people can stand with Gaza beyond what took place this week?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really want to say, and very loudly and clearly, is that the Palestinian people are responsible for their own liberation. They're the ones that live streamed their own killing. They are the ones that survived as resistance, and their mere survival was resistance. And now we have a situation where, it was part of global collective human effort that resulted in turning the tide against this occupation and this genocide. And so we can see the people's power that has manifested so far, and we need to continue exerting this pressure. We do this through boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Today we had in Pinelands, our little area here in Cape Town, a youth march with children marching and young people marching to say that the children that are currently in prison, illegally, obviously detained as hostages in Israeli prisons, need to be released, that food needs to get to the children in Gaza. And so we can mobilize young people, different types of segments across our society to organize and mobilize to bring more awareness to the issues facing the Palestinian people in Gaza, as well as with our pockets. Boycotting is a really powerful means. We've seen the major brands that have been supporting this genocide really suffer in terms of their shares, and we need to continue to drive that agenda. South Africa also needs to stop selling coal. We need to put pressure on our government to prohibit the sale of coal to Israel, as well as close the Israeli embassy in South Africa. Right. So these are very tangible steps that can be taken, and we as a collective people can really make voice on this issue.
Certainly. Dr. Fatima Hendricks, thank you so much again for your time. Welcome back home as well. That is, of course, Dr. Fatima Hendricks, one of the 6 South African activists on the Global Sumud Flotilla that was on its way to Gaza.